the new moon of Taurus forming a grand square with Mars in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius, and Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, perfected April 27th, but it tells a story of the entire lunar cycle. It summarizes the entire lunar cycle, taking us from April 27th to May 26, 2025. Hello, my name is Eliane Nicole. I'm your astrologer and tarot reader, and in this video, I am going to talk about the new moon of Taurus and all of the aspects it's making, the grand square, and what that means for the next, coming 29 days. But first I want to say, if you're watching this on Instagram, I'm only going to post the first 3 minutes here. The entire video will be available on my YouTube channel, Eliane Nicole. My YouTube channel is my name, Eliane Nicole. Please find me there. I will put a link in the profile bio of my Instagram to get to the YouTube channel. If you're watching this on Instagram, if you're watching this on YouTube, first of all, please make sure that you subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share. Helps me in the algorithm, helps me to grow my channel, and puts me in a position to continue to give these free astrological offerings. If you're watching this on Instagram, please make sure that you are following astrology.tarot.Eliane Nicole. Please like, please comment, please share. It's free for you and very helpful to me. And now, without further ado, I want to get into the translation of this new moon in Taurus. And this new moon in Taurus is an interesting configuration because it is forming this grand T square. And you'll find a lot of astrologers, it's a grand cross that it's forming because of Black Moon Lilith. You will find that a lot of astrologers are only talking about the T-square nature of this new moon because they're not involving Lilith. But I find that Lilith is very impactful and very significant. And so I do use her in my interpretations. And so from the way that I read the sky, there's actually a grand square forming. And what a grand square is, squares are 90-degree angles, and so they are hard angles. So they present challenges or problems that require action. And even though they're very challenging aspects, they are very important because we build our 3D world with 90-degree angles. So they're very important for manifesting and for creativity and for action and for knowing what our next move is and things like that. But let's just start with new moons and what about new moons in general. And if you follow my astrology, you know that new moons are seed planting points. We are planting seeds at new moons, whether we realize it or not, so we might as well do it with some intention. The new moon of Taurus is generally going to be about things like self-esteem, values, money, food, crops, comfort, luxury, patience, the environment, nature. All of these things are under the purview of Taurus, and I may have left out a couple of things. Taurus has a lot to do with the sensual pleasures of life, what we can taste and smell and see. And Taurus is a very sensual sign. And so it's great to set intentions around any of those topics around this new moon. And then you look at where the new moon falls in your chart, and then you set intentions around the topic of that house too, and then that makes it really specific for you. But this new moon in particular is going to be very personal to obviously anyone who's a Taurus. And again, as I record this and post this, it's the day after. Normally I like to be ahead, but when it comes to new moons, it's still worthwhile to post it even the day after because of the fact that it summarizes the entire lunar cycle. And as I do this reading and as I post this, we're still technically under the Taurus new moon energy. The moon will switch into Gemini the night of April 28th, around 11:30 or something on the West Coast in LA where I am, and it's the 29th in DC and, you know, Europe and everything. So anyway, and in terms of doing new moon intentions on the altar, if you're doing an altar with flowers and candles and pictures of your ancestors or crystals or anything that you use to do your new moon ritual, it's still okay to do it the day after the new moon or even the day following, because the light, it's still the first light of the moon that's growing. It's, in fact, it's better to do your ritual for intentions that you're setting that you want to manifest. It's better to do those rituals after the new moon has perfected rather than before, because before the new moon is technically the dying moon or the balsamic moon, and that moon is good for banishing spells, like if you're trying to eliminate or get rid of something. And so if anything, it's better, yeah, to do your new moon manifesting stuff after the new moon has perfected and the light of the moon is starting to grow. But I digress. I want to get back to this new moon in Taurus. So it's forming a grand T-square with Mars in Leo, you know, finally out of Cancer. We had such a long story with Mars in Cancer. And then the T-square also involves Pluto in Aquarius, and then Black Moon Lilith. And these are really, really tough planets for the new moon to be in hard angles with. So it does show that there are definitely some obstacles or challenges that need to be overcome in this cycle. And these are the fixed signs. And so the fixed signs is the most stubborn energy. So it looks like, you know, kind of stubborn standoff type of energy, but involving more than two people. So these are situations where if you're just looking at the T-square, you're looking at three parties involved in a standoff. And if you're looking at the grand square, you're looking at four parties involved in the standoff. So any way you cut it, there's 3 to 4 entities, people involved in this standoff, and it feels like an immovable situation where something's got to give. And that's kind of what this entire cycle is about. And it's going to be personal to you if you have any planets in the first decan, 0 to 10 degrees of any of the fixed signs. So Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, or Aquarius. Otherwise, you may be watching it go on with the Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius people in your life. You know, whether that's your family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, etc. Or, you know, you're going to be reading about it in the headlines, because it's certainly definitely going, this T-square is for sure going to affect the world astrology and, you know, definitely the USA astrology. I think that when you're looking at, you know, Mars, that's the god of war. So we're dealing with, you know, on a personal level, Mars can be brothers, Mars can be men, police, Mars can also be, you know, knives, guns, you know, Mars is armies and warriors, and you know, Mars in Leo is very bold and very courageous and very chivalrous, and that's coming up against the new moon in Taurus, which is very solid and stable and wants things to stay the same. It has to do with nature and the environment. So that's coming up against a square with Mars and Leo. So there's tension there. And then Pluto and Aquarius has so much to do with the future and technology, AI, robots, you know, the internet. But it also has to do with humanitarian ideals. It has to do with communities and groups and what's best for the whole. And so there's tension there as well. And then Black Moon, Lilith, and Scorpio represents a mystery. It's something that's unseen, something that's in the dark, that is in relationship to these forces that we are able to see that are all struggling with each other. So it looks like there's an unknown that's kind of rising from, you know, the depths of the darkness for us to deal with. And this, it can, you know, the dark feminine, it can have to do with specifically issues for women. You know, it can have to do with darker topics around women, like abortion or rape or abuse or, you know, sex trafficking, all that type of stuff, murder, you know. But it can also have to do with, in general, it can have to do with Black women as well, because Black Moon Lilith can represent that for the collective. In our personal charts, though, she represents aspects of the dark feminine that we repress or suppress within ourselves. And for women, that can have to do with areas that we have shame around our sexuality or our rage or traumas that happened in the past or whatever. And in men, it can represent, you know, their darkest or deepest fantasies about women, or, you know, repressed anger or rage or things like that around women. They can project that onto women. They can call in women in their life that help play out that stuff when there's not consciousness around it, when there's not awareness around it. So anyway, yeah, Black Moon Lilith is in the mix, and so it does look like there will be the rise of or topics, some darker topics around women brought to the forefront in the headlines, on the world stage. That will be a big focus. There are some challenges that require action. And this has to do probably with war, technology, the leadership. All of these things are in a square with each other. And so, again, you know, it's going to play out differently for the collective than it will for us personally. And I'm kind of going back between both. In our personal lives, you know, when you're looking at the new moon of Taurus and everything that Taurus represents, Taurus is the economy. So in our personal lives, that's going to be our own finances. On the collective, that's going to be the world economy, the country's economy. That's a big part of what is in this immovable standoff between the war, the future, you know, the unseen, what's going on with women, the darker topics that are rising to the surface. It has a lot to do with money. It has a lot to do with finances. It has a lot to do with food and crops, and it has a lot to do with the environment and Mother Nature. And so these are topics where, yeah, there's going to be a lot of struggle and challenge in this lunar cycle from April 27th to May 26th. Taurus is also going to have to do with comforts, luxuries, luxury brands. And, you know, it's a situation that is going to require a lot of patience. Taurus is all about patience, you know. And the Leo Aquarius opposition between, or square with Mars and Leo, the god of war in Leo, squaring off with Pluto and Aquarius, has so much to do with, you know, individual expression and personal desires versus what's best for the community, what's best for the group, what's best for the whole. You know, we can see some topics coming up against celebrities versus technology, the monarchs versus technology, the monarchs versus the people and the populace, you know, you know, I think that on the world stage, the Taurus, Scorpio, the Taurus Aquarius part of it can also be about, you know, cash versus crypto, what's real versus what's virtual, and what's AI. You know, all of these topics are big topics where there's problems and challenges coming up, requiring action that will hopefully lead to solutions, you know, by the end of the cycle. The full moon of May 12th in Scorpio is where this all climaxes in this particular cycle. And Mars and Pluto are coming up on the exact opposition during this new moon. And so, you know, that can bring some mayhem during this cycle. This is the third and final exact opposition of Mars and Leo. The first one was November 3rd, 2 days before the election. The second one was January 2nd, the beginning of the year. Both, you know, showed, you know, I mean, this is major power struggle energy. This is about brute force and takeovers. This is about, you know, huge transfers of power going on behind the scenes. And this is all, you know, this is related to wars. This is related to, you know, I mean, it's probably going on in the sports world as well, because Mars also rules athletes, which I forgot to mention earlier. But I talk about that a lot if you follow my videos a lot. So, you know, all of this stuff is coming up during this cycle. And the exact Mars-Pluto opposition is coming, oh gosh, I don't have the date in front of me, so I'm not gonna go down a rabbit hole looking for it. I don't even have my ephemeris sitting right here. I'm a little out of it. The last video I did was the full moon of Libra, and then my grandmother passed away, and so then I was caught up in the, you know, swept up into, you know, funeral arrangements and the wake and the funeral and lots of family events and lots of, you know, grieving and just going through it. And the full moon of Libra actually illuminated for me that she was going into hospice. I found out the night of that full moon of Libra, which is interesting because I have 5 planets in Libra. So that full moon ended up being very personal to me. And then the rest of the events of the lunar cycle were surrounded around that. And, you know, that lunar cycle started with the Aries solar eclipse, and my grandmother who passed away was in Aries. And so this has been going on, part of the Aries, Libra, North Node, South Node story. Very exacting astrology for me, but I digress. I want to stick to the new moon of Taurus video that I'm doing. Getting back in the saddle to do videos. I'm going to be coming back to you guys with a lot more videos, so I may be a little rusty today, but thank you for bearing with me. And yeah, so this new moon of Taurus, in general, for us personally, I do believe it's calling for us to do some shadow work, which means, you know, how do we do shadow work? You know, how do we face our shadow? Well, a lot of times situations bring it up, and then we are given a choice to be in denial or to kind of confront the shadow. And that's what this period is, you know, I think that's how you win the day in this next lunar cycle, is by, you know, don't look away, you know. The shadow is our insecurities, it's our fears, it's our deepest pains, it's our deepest traumas, and we need to heal it, and we need to look at it, and that is going to help alleviate some of the pressure in the T-square, you know. But there's other actions that we're going to have to take to alleviate the pressure of this T-square. And again, it's only going to be really personal if you have planets in the early degrees of the fixed signs. Otherwise, you may see it going around and people going on with people around you. Look to the houses in your chart, the 4 houses. There's 4 houses that the T-square is forming. And you may see that you have things to work out between those 4 areas of your life. And it's going to feel immovable if you have planets that are in those early degrees, because it's going to feel really tense. The further and further away it gets, a little bit more leeway you have to work with it. All Tauruses will probably feel this personally on some level, as well as Leo and Aquarius and Scorpio. If you would like to see how this T-square is forming in your chart, contact me for a reading. I would love to read for you. I read on Zoom, so I can read for people anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and you can keep a recording of the reading if you want, following the reading. I'll put a link in the description, notes of how to go to my website to book a reading with me, or you can email me and say hi and book a reading directly. If none of the times on the site work out, I can always find other times off that calendar if necessary. And yes, thank you for joining me as I get back into the saddle of recording videos again after a break. I look forward to reading for you. If you would like to thank me for this reading by buying me a coffee or a tea or croissant, I will also put a link to my Venmo to make a donation. And have a wonderful new moon of Taurus. I will be back soon with more videos. Bye.